Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 8 of the Game Night, coming to you live and direct from Japan. No, we're not.
Yeah.
We just have
one of us is.
one of us is. I am Jason Rose, one of your hosts in the plaid. I'm the Canadian guy, and you're over there wearing the Canadian plaid. And
I live in the mountains, man. This is mountain man, plaid.
And who
I'm
are
Eric
you?
Kane, and our guest is Ollie Barder, all the way over in Tokyo, though hailing from Great Britain.
Welcome, Ollie. Pleasure to meet you. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah. Me and Ollie have podcasted a couple times before, and also played some Demon Souls together so that he could give me all the best items and totally break the game for me, because then I was so overpowered. I was just like, kill everyone.
Didn't I give you like a +5 Crescent Falcon or something ridiculous?
So you gave me a few things, and that was it was ridiculous, because I was like one-shotting everybody, I was like, wow, okay, I should probably. This is almost like cheating.
I'm not going to lie. To platinum the Demon Souls remake, I totally exploited the Blue Blood sword with the luck exploit. I just wanted to platinum that. Then they patched it to get rid of all that, and I refused to patch that game and update it, because I just wanted to get that trophy to say I got the platinum, whatever. But yeah, it completely breaks the game.
So I didn't do that. I'm still pretty much bossing my Crescent Falcon +5, and I platinumed the game, and I also got the penetrator armor, which was the world's most tedious thing. It's just so bad. And I tried to give it to Eric, because I think I played through the game something like 18 times.
Oh my god!
And I had so many of those, penetrator armor sets. And you can't exchange that. It's one of the few items you can't share with other people.
That was one of the things they added in the remake, correct?
Yeah, it was in the original, but only the penetrator boss had it. But in the remake, they allowed it and also things like the hoplite shield, which you can't play in the original game, but you can in the new one. But I love the Demon Souls remaster. I thought that was absolutely... And they made so many good changes in terms of all of the... what is it? So basically, if you were overburdened, it automatically sent items back, which made the upgrading of the weapons and armor so much more humane.
Yeah.
Because you need all these different shards of this and chunks of that. And,
and you're smoking grass constantly in that game. So you've got 18 different kinds of grass. And hey, so here's a question for... Oh, so go ahead.
Is that I can see your audio is recording. Can you see my audio when I talk?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool. Because I can't see that. I'm just double checking.
Oh, okay.
It's all cool.
Yeah, no, I see everybody's just recording.
So cool. Excellent. Sorry, you were going to say. Sorry, Eric.
Oh, I was going to say, do you have any dirt for us on any other From Software stuff? Like anything that you've heard? Any whispers in the wind?
Confirm or deny anything that I have heard. But yeah, no. I mean, Eric knows I know a few people there. And I mean, to be honest, a lot of the guys that I used to know have left, because they used to be the old mecha crowd, which was things for like Armored Core and Other Centuries episode. A lot of those guys have moved on. Some of them are still there. I was kind of surprised that you didn't jive with Armored Core 6, but
we
I
talked
probably
about
don't want to get into that.
Well, I think it was fine. I think it's really tough. I think I've just been my focus has moved so much towards television shows and movies,
right?
That there's I have to prioritize my time, and so games really have to grab me if I'm not playing them socially or for fun. So I think that's probably part of it. Like Elden Ring, I played the shit out of that game, and I can't wait for Shadow of the Erd Tree. Armored Core 6, I don't know. It was cool, and I enjoyed it, but it wasn't something that I was really going to put a lot of time into. I don't know. Maybe it's the format, the mission format or something about it. I feel like I needed to give it a lot more time than I had, also to really get into the nitty gritty and I think it was cool. I mean, it was clearly a well-made game, and I thought it did what it was setting out to do really well. I just think it's I don't know. It's probably just partly where I'm at with my...
Nah, I mean, in your defense, I think two things that Armored Core 6 didn't get right was I still think the controls are too complicated. Like the fact that you have to use all 4 triggers for each of the individual weapons, I think is just insane. And you don't have that in like other games, modern games. That's kind of like a throwback to some of the old bad days with Armored Core. And then the other thing also was I think that they got the single player balancing really wrong at the beginning. So like the first mission literally throws newbies.
It just crushes you.
And not in a way like Dark Souls does that too with the first boss, but
the thing is you can
there's an exploit
and then progress.
Right.
That's the thing. It's like, oh well, you died. Well, now you know how hard the game is. In this, you had to kill
the guy. Yeah, that first boss, it took me a while. I'm not gonna lie. And and see, here's the difference. Like when I played Bloodborne, the Father Gascon or whatever his name was, he was really hard for me. Partly because like Bloodborne changed the formula from Dark Souls, so I was so used to one style of playing that I had to like totally adjust my brain to play that boss. Now if I play that boss, I'll beat him the first try, no problem. But I had to really relearn, and that was okay. That was fine because I really loved the game so much that I didn't mind like getting my ass kicked for a while. But Armored Core, I don't know. I just felt like I don't know if this is really what I know it's like from what I love about games is a very specific set of things. Like the exploration, the level design, the mood, all of that is almost even more important than the combat. And Armored Core just is a totally different. It's just a totally different thing, So
it's a different tradition. Also, I from a personal standpoint, I get why they went with the tethered lock-on in terms of action game, making it easier for people to track target.
Sure,
but I think the problem with that was that the game was just too fast. And the reason they had to have the lock-on was because you couldn't manually track enemies anymore. And I think that was a mistake. But I think it's a mistake, but at the same time, I think it was a good thing they had it. But I was kind of conflicted with that. That was the only kind of really new thing to Armored Core 6. The rest of it was kind of like a remix of all the old games.
Just pretty.
So, a remix of the old games with an actual budget. Because like the old games were made for like, I don't know, $5 and a packet of chips. So it was just what they managed to get out of the old games was kind of amazing. But that was kind of interesting seeing From Software's older tradition come through in a modern way. But I do feel it wasn't just the first boss, but I think a lot of the bosses, like the balancing, they got really badly wrong initially, and then they had to patch it and make it more normal. But I think
it forced people to exploit. Like there was just 1 or 2 builds that were just almost, I wouldn't say necessary, but they were just so much better than everything that you had no real reason to go other way. And if the game was pushing you that hard, it's like, this is where we need to do. And that sort of eliminates the whole point of Armored Core and really From's formula in a lot of different ways.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing is
like there's always exploitable builds and things that are OP, but really there's almost everything that you can make it work.
But the thing is with classic Armored Core, that's kind of where the Souls games got it from, was the original Armored Core game. So it was kind of weird that Armored Core 6 didn't have that. Also, they had a really nice tutorial for the combat, but they had nothing for the customization. So
the game, which there was a lot.
Which it's half the game. So,
Like, I actually, Armored Core 6 is the first From game that I felt needed maybe 6 months to even a year in the oven more because of that balancing aspect. And just, that was clearly a passion project. There wasn't a lot of people calling for a new Armored Core 6, but sure, the hardcore, but like, not a lot of people want to. I really liked it. I didn't play a ton of it, but like 1,000 other games, I can't wait to play it.
Yeah, I know.
But it's like
time.
It was right alongside a bunch of other things they were doing, and I just hearing the talk around it, because everyone was incredibly hyped for it. And then when it came out, even the most hardcore fans were like, it just seemed off. Like the narrative from.
It kind of is. I mean, the thing that I liked, the things that they did brilliantly, I think it actually had actual promotion this time. Like I said, it had a real budget. They had fantastic localization.
Oh, the trailers were just incredible.
Yeah, the localization was fantastic. Frog Nation, a British company that does all the Souls games, they'd also did it. They're pretty much the gold standard of Japanese games localization as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, no, I wasn't disappointed with it. I mean, I've played, like, I've S ranked, like, I've platinumed both the PlayStation and the Xbox Series X one. And
well, it sounds like you hate it.
Yeah, I fucking hate it. But the thing that, I mean, I've been playing the multiplayer on PlayStation 5 a lot, and I will say the ranked multiplayer is garbage. And that's basically because of what you're saying. It really is a lot of really dishonest trick builds that you kind of go in, and it's just like, and I mean, I'm really high ranked now, so it's just, but even then, there's just no fun in it because it's like rock, paper, scissors.
Yeah.
And you just go in there and you just look at them build and you go, I can't win this. So
and it's funny you brought up localization. I think that's going to be something we talk a little bit later.
Oh yeah, later on, yeah, totally.
That's become a hot button topic. But I mean, are we getting that Bloodborne remake?
Or what? I have no idea.
Or a sequel,
or the sequel.
I have no idea. So the thing with
just give us the patch.
No,
did you see that right? PlayStation just had that recent bracket of the best games, and they didn't even include Bloodborne, and everyone's just like, "What are you guys doing?"
So there's a thing that I don't know the details, but this is an educated guess. I think From Software and Sony have a very, very long relationship. Believe it or not, the first Armored Core was actually a Sony funded game for the PlayStation, and even though it was published by From Software. But with Demon's Souls and Bloodborne, that is owned by Sony because they're the publisher. So with Demon's Souls, the remaster, even though it was amazing, I don't think it sold that well. And that's my guess, based on looking at what I've seen. And if I was to hazard a guess, I think Sony's kind of reticent, or they're still working on it. Who knows? I mean, that's on the Sony side, and I don't really have much visibility into Japan Sony. And if I wonder if I don't know.
Who mentioning that it didn't sell well, or guessing that it didn't sell well, I wonder if Elden Ring changes the equation in general.
For sure, but I mean, I think sales, sorry, Ollie, if that is their business outlook, I find that extremely short-sighted and naive. One, PlayStation 5s were incredibly difficult to get. Two, install bases trickle out. It's just, what a weird thing to judge. And then really, that's the one game, a game that everyone agrees is incredibly high quality, critically extremely well received. Some still say it's the best game on the PS5. And this one outlier that may or may not have sold a little soft. And then every other From game is just bonkers bananas, shooting to the stars. Like, it isn't plateauing, it's going up. It's going to keep going. And that's the reason you don't do it. I don't know. I wouldn't buy that. And if that is the narrative, that's just bad business.
Well, Sony's crazy.
I think that there is a bit of weird politics that you can see happening from the outside at Sony. Because if you saw, like, the past few years, they got rid of a lot of their old creative talent from within the studio. They just kind of had like a weird Game of Thrones type culling of talent.
We talked
to George R. R. Martin
in the last couple of shows,
But yeah, so that was kind of a bit weird. So I think because some of the people that led that in Japan are now gone, sadly, as in Demon's Souls Remaster. But I mean, a Bloodborne remaster could be happening. But like you said, I think the real problem with Demon's Souls, the remaster, was the fact that it wasn't a bad game and people didn't want it. It was that no one could buy a PlayStation 5. So I think that probably hurt it more than anything else. But I honestly don't know. I'd love to see a Bloodborne remaster in the same way as Demon's Souls. I think that would be absolutely amazing. And what's the name? Is it Bluepoint? Is that the name of the company?
Bluepoint game.
Those guys are amazing.
They're the best.
Like, they do a great job.
Yeah, they are one of the best, like, porting remaster houses studios.
Can I just add, though, real quickly, though, that I kind of prefer the PS3 version.
I knew you were
the PS5 version.
I
just like how. Yeah, it's so. I don't know. Maybe it's just nostalgia. I feel like the new one, as it's a great remaster or remake or whatever. Or remake. I feel like sometimes it's too good looking. Like I wanted to look a little dingier. Because I'm sorry, I still think Demon's Souls on PS3 is a fantastic looking game.
Yes.
But you lose a little bit of the moody, gringy.
I think the problem was I gave you like really powerful armor and weapons, and that probably killed it for you.
Yeah, maybe so.
Honestly, but also I can't jive with this at all. Like I hear this from like long time. But I'm going to say,
I was getting to a larger point though.
Okay,
Bloodborne had frame rate issues,
pacing,
and that's frame rate. Frame rate issues. You couldn't get a high enough frame rate on that game. Like I would just love to see a version that gives you 120 frames per second or 60 frames per second.
So
load times were bad on Bloodborne.
Yeah, I don't know horrible. That's how long it's been. How long has it been since you played it, Eric?
Bloodborne?
Yeah,
or Demon's Souls? Bloodborne. Ooh, it's been a while. I fired it up. When Elden Ring came out, I fired it up, and I played all the Dark Souls games just a little bit, just to compare, just to remind myself how they play compared to Elden Ring, because Elden Ring made so many refinements to gameplay.
So at launch, it was really bad. Load times were abysmal. They did have frame rate issues, but by the time I got around to it, most of that had been fixed. But the biggest issue most people had was the frame pacing issue. It seemed to... it's got that judder jank, and it was never patched. It seemed to, it doesn't run buttery smooth or anything, but it definitely could use a remake. But I think most of those issues at release got mopped up. But I know a couple years ago, it was reported, like Colin Moriarty actually said that he was told that the Bloodborne remake was getting worked on, and like he was confident enough to actually say it. So. And it didn't happen.
I don't know about the Sony inside stuff. So,
yeah.
It'd be great if it was happening, but I did hear rumbles from Sony that it didn't sell what they wanted it to. And then they laid off a lot of people, which normally is a sign that they don't want to go down that route again. And also just to say to Eric's 2009 Demon's Souls, my problem with the original one wasn't so much how it looked or the frame rate or anything like that. It was really just about item collection. And
I agree on that front completely. I was talking purely like aesthetic.
Yeah, that was
bad.
Yeah, the night and day change for me was that one 100% thing where
better. Yeah,
because the whole thing, it made exploration worthwhile because you could actually find stuff you needed and you could keep it. Whereas on the old game, if I found stuff I needed, I have to drop a really valuable weapon or a shield, and then how am I going to get back to the Nexus? And it's just like, it was not a friendly game because the whole point of the roguelite is that you're meant to be kind of slowly progressing as you get, even if you die a lot. But the problem with the original Demon's Souls is it actively sort of discouraged you from exploration and collecting stuff and upgrading. So it was like, why am I doing this?
Well, Dark Souls definitely improved on a lot of those things. I think the invention of the Estus Flask, for one thing, was a huge improvement over having to use moongrass to heal.
That was, it's very underrated that.
Estus Flask is
and also the way that they positioned the bonfires. So the bonfires in Demon's Souls are just really at the beginning of the map. Whereas with Dark Souls, because they dotted them through the world, that always meant that you were always going forward to your next save point.
Right. But you might loop back around eventually. Yeah. But there was always that.
There was always, wherever you were going, there was always a way to save, basically.
I actually don't think any other From Software game has done bonfires as well as Dark Souls 1.
Yeah,
I think they did the perfect, because I think they became far too abundant.
Yes.
Once you got to like Dark Souls 3 or even 2, but I remember there's one place in Dark Souls 3, and I can't remember the location, but I got to a bonfire and I walked like 50 yards and there was another bonfire, and I was like, what is going on here? Yeah. And there is something about Demon's Souls, the brutality of only having that one point and then having to unlock the shortcuts that I do respect. But what I think Dark Souls does better also is creating a world that's it's not spokes. You're not going to different realms. It's all contained. Yeah. And I think Bloodborne came close with its world design, but I still think Dark Souls 1 has the best level design, the best bonfire placement, the best like overall like cohesive. And I love Elden Ring, and I think they did such cool things with the open world, but I still don't think anything's topped Dark Souls for that design.
Of
I don't
all
know.
of them, especially after the remaster, I still think the first Demon Souls is the best one. But
it's got great levels and like areas.
I think it's also the combat and also the weapons and a lot of the lore's a lot more, so the story's a lot more ambiguous, even by From Software standards. And I kind of like that a lot. And it was much like their older games, which are very kind of, very, very ambiguous. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But no, Demon Souls, and also I think the remaster, also the points you talked about, frame rate and loading times, they were amazing. So I mean, if they are doing a Bloodborne remaster, I really want it to happen, but I'm not sure it is. But again, I will say this: I don't know, because From Software weren't really involved with the Demon Souls remaster. That was all Bluepoint, and I don't know anyone at Bluepoint, and I don't really know anyone anymore at Sony Japan, because most of them are gone. So I don't really know. And if I did know, I probably wouldn't say anything, because I wouldn't want to be, because the thing, I'll be honest, with Armored Core 6, I knew it was being made around about 2016, and I told no one, because I love those games, and I didn't want to be the guy that spoiled it for everyone, and then everybody, if I leaked that whole thing with, the entire, management of that would have, freaked out and probably cancelled it out of panic attack. So why would I do that? So I knew it was happening, but I didn't say anything. But with Bloodborne, I would genuinely say I have no idea. I would love it to be true, but I don't know, is the honest.
You know what was really cool in Demon Souls? I'm just going to throw this back in there. Dark Souls for me is like the cohesiveness of the world, but I love how Demon Souls had so many things happening while you weren't aware of them happening. Like the guy you rescue, I can't think of his name right now, but he goes back to the Nexus and starts killing people.
Yes. So,
like the different like world states, like black and white, like all these things, like you just don't know. It's so cryptic and it's so obscure, and it's so like, God, it's just what a game! Like to come almost come out of the blue like that.
It did.
What was great about that though was a lot of those things came from like the Kingsfield and Shadow Tower games, but because nobody had played them, they had no frame of reference for what was being referenced. So I think the big advantage that Demon Souls was, like I was saying, so Demon Souls took a very Western approach to the camera and the controls, basically from Oblivion, kind of, and then just kind of merged them with what Kingsfield and Shadow Tower did to make something, an improved version of what it could be. So I think there was a lot of really clever stuff in there that was really old school. Like, I don't know, like you always get like the Sword of Moonlight in everything, but that comes from like Kingsfield. And I just love that stuff. And also the Moonlight in Demon Souls is the best Moonlight in the Soul series. It's better than all the other ones because it ignores shields. So it's great. And the thing is like when you're doing PvP and you just turn up in a map and you've got like a +5 Moonlight and you're just going, come on. And then you're doing full on magic damage. And unless they've got like amazing magic armor, it's like, it doesn't matter because your blocking is irrelevant to me.
They're screwed. Yeah,
they're screwed. And so I always used to like, PvP always have like the Moonlight on a switchable out. So I wasn't really worried about using like bow and arrow in PvP because it's all about close combat. And also if you've got spells and everything. That's the other thing with Demon Souls also is it made miracles worthwhile, which is the evacuate miracle where you can go straight back to the Nexus, which was incredibly helpful. But then again, trying to get the Talisman of Beasts is an absolute bastard because you have to kill a black phantom that fires fireballs in a really enclosed space. And he doesn't just fire the small fireballs, he fires the really big exploding ones that do tons of damage. So trying to get, and the Talisman of Beasts has like the best buff on magic and miracles, and you don't have to switch out between a catalyst and I can't remember what the miracle thing that you have to switch between. But I also thought that was really interesting. Like you have two versions of magic, and one is basically faith-based, and the other one is basically sort of evil witch-based. And they like the evil witch one is more about like just straight up destroying everything, and then you do have some like really powerful attacks with the faith one, but with anyway, I think I'm going way much too into Demon Souls.
No, it's good. It's
no,
good.
We're nerding out.
I feel like
let's move on to the other stuff that we need to talk about. Otherwise, I'll just
absolutely.
Sure. Let me just add this one thing. This whole Demon Souls original being better than the remake talk just reminds me of like people that pined for Final Fantasy XI when I don't know if anyone ever played that, but I played it for like a decade almost. And that game is the Dark Souls of MMOs, I think. I mean, maybe there's some instances, but that game was so hard. And so it's like if you played it, you hated it. But when it was patched to streamline, you look back on it in fondness. And you're like, oh, I wish we could go back. No one wants to play that anymore. But anyway, that's just a personal opinion. I played Remake and I was like, and I heard so many people saying exactly what you guys were saying. You know, the original's better, this and that. I'm like, this has got to be nostalgia. I don't know.
I think in most cases, when it comes to remasters, I think most of the original games are the better games. They just don't look as good. The only kind of standout ones for me for the Demon Souls remaster and the Metroid Prime remaster are the ones that kind of are.
Call of Duty's done a couple really good ones. Modern Warfare and Modern Warfare 2 were great remasters.
Yeah.
They were just the same game, looking better.
I mean, to be fair, I always come from the Japan side because those are the games I play. But no, you're absolutely right. I did play the remasters for those. They
did a good job. A genuinely good job, yeah.
What else was there? So you got Metroid Prime, Demon Souls. There was a few others that were actually really good, but those are the ones that really stand out in like recent years as being that's really amazing. So yeah. Anyway, sorry,
it's fine.
Do you know what I want to see? A Shrek remaster. It's the original Shrek with all the same lines, but with modern CGI. Don't change anything about the dialogue or the script. Just make it look prettier. That would be awesome.
Yeah.
Anyways, let's move on. So, I have a little bit of PTSD from this event called Gamergate from 2014.
We're doing this already.
You're going to go right into the Sweet Baby Inc.
Let's do it.
Which makes me think of a tattooed baby. I'm not going to lie. Every time I hear that, I just think of a tattooed baby.
Does anyone remember EGM with Sean Baby?
Nope.
Oh, EGM magazine. There was this guy, Sean Baby. He would talk about video games, and he had like a mohawk, and he would color it all the time. A lot of people who read those magazines growing up. Okay. I hear Sweet Baby, I think Sean Baby. Anyway, completely irrelevant.
All right, Sean Baby Inc. So I'm not going to lie. Like, a lot of people sent me a bunch of stuff about this when it was going down. And I kind of, with my PTSD, was like, fuck off. I don't want to do it. People are like, Gamergate 2. And I'm like, I didn't want a sequel, man. I don't want this remastered. So I like the original better. Blue Point, you sons of bitches. No, but from what I can tell, Sweet Baby Inc. is a consultancy firm that helps developers add diversity and inclusion and all this stuff into their games. And the only reason that it became a subject of discussion is that a guy on Steam created a curation of all the games that Sweet Baby Inc. had worked on, and then they tried to get him banned, which is what we call the Streisand effect.
Literally the example of it, yes.
Where you try to shut someone down or push something down and it blows up.
Yes.
Which is really kind of what happened with Gamergate, to be fair. Sure, the whole, everyone tried to shut down the conversation. And so instead of being like a week of people yelling on Reddit, it became this fucking, apparently it elected Trump, so that's kind of like, it does feel like a repeat. From what I can tell, and maybe it's just because I haven't gotten involved with it really, it's definitely not the same. We're not at the same volume as Gamergate.
I don't know about that.
I mean,
I think
not might just be me going like this.
Not from a lack of trying on the media side. Like, the whole Gamergate 2.0 came from the media trying to frame this into
I think I stopped reading game journalism a long time ago.
But unfortunately, you have to wade into that swamp in order to get this picture. And
Gamers are dead.
Well, you bring that up, but it's funny because the hit piece narrative from all of them, who they claim they don't, talk and organize these things, they all seem to come out at the same time, and they all
it is organized. I know it is.
I'm sure we all do, and they all omitted the actual reason. Like you said, none of them actually talked about that they tried to go after this Brazilian kid who just made a list. I don't even care if you think the list is, inappropriate or not. It's just a list. Unfortunately, these people cannot help themselves. The perpetually online who just want to gang up. Yeah. It's like, think of being in high school and you gang up on somebody. It's no different. They do that online perpetually with all their little booger friends who were on there, and they use their buzzwords and let's harass this guy. Well, you know what? Same thing has happened last time. The buzz gets on, they're like, well, fuck this. No, a guy can make a list. The word had already kind of been out about this Sweet Baby stuff. People had already been talking about it and they didn't love it, but it was still like, flying really low under the radar. You really had to be dig if you wanted to learn and know all about it. And the truth is, a lot of the games that they worked on, we'll never know to what extent they did or didn't. And they can claim they didn't, or they, whatever. But I like a lot of the games, so it's not a big deal to me. But
I don't really care.
Yeah, I think people. But I'm just saying the fact that they omitted the harassment and trying to get this list banned, which is the direct catalyst.
That's kind of an important point.
It's the sole reason this thing blew up and the backlash happened. And then this happens every time with this group. They just claim the victimhood and they frame it in different ways. And now it's a harassment campaign. It's misogynist. It's deeply rooted in racism and white supremacists. And it's Gamergate 2.0. And now the Department of Defense is trucking in on it.
Sweet baby Department of Defense.
Are terrorists. No. The thing that for me is that there are a lot of consulting companies in the games industry,
of course,
that kind of try and help game developers on all manner of different things, like to do with how the game plays, how it, what the story's like. Very few of that involves any kind of ESG or DEI stuff. And to be honest, the stuff that does involve it is entirely, it's very small actually, and the impact they have realistically is actually very, very small. However, the thing that always upsets me about all of this, and why I'm always on the side of the gamers, is the gamers are always kind of just thrown under the bus by their own, press. And what I still don't understand that the journalists, and to be honest, it's like a small group of these really, really kind of bad, sort of cliquey journalists.
Can I just interject really quick, Ollie? Yeah. It's not just the journalists this time. A lot of these devs are jumping right alongside with it.
That's been happening for a while.
And you see it.
It's the same clique.
Yeah, it's the same clique. And the thing is, it's still a really small group of people because the vast majority of... So, you saw that crazy video of all these developers screaming at GDC. It's a tiny number of people. It's a tiny number of people compared to the full, number of game developers out there. Right, it's a very small group of people that are basically literally in bed with the same journalists as well. So it's just a very small group of people that are very kind of cliquey and status obsessed, narcissistic, wanting to be the center of attention. And what I find really, it still really upsets me is the way that they are going after their own readership. I don't see any other types of press, not really, to this extent, absolutely despise their
I think a little bit in the music and sports press, we see a little bit of that. I think,
not to this degree.
Not to this degree, no. This is definitely I think, you know what? I have a theory about that, and it's not just the people involved, because I think those people, that cliquey group we're talking about, exist in other media. But there's this word, gamer, that doesn't exist in any other space. There's not like a word for people who watch TV and movies. There's not a word for people who watch basketball. There's not a word. And so they're able to take this word and weaponize it.
Do you know?
It's a linguistic trick is what it is.
And what's interesting about that is that if you go to Japan, there isn't really a word for someone who plays video games. It's just someone who plays video. There is no gamer. It's just part of the culture.
It's like people who watch movies.
Yeah, and one of the things that I love, I mean, you're generally called otaku, which is just basically you're a nerd, but it's not specific to like, manga, anime, toys, whatever. But generally, there's not really a term for gamer. And I think also this really interesting for me from a game development standpoint, having worked in development in Japan, is that there are far more women in game development in Japan than anywhere in the US or UK. And the reason for that isn't because of misogynistic men. It's because I think basically gaming is just part of the cultural framework in Japan. And so there's no stigma attached to it. There's none of this kind of labeling of who and what you are. And basically everybody feels that they can make it. I mean, one of the best game directors in Japan who makes the Animal Crossing games is a lady. So, and like, no one's really talking about any of this. And I find that always very, very strange. Whenever
Isn't that kind of what we hope for, is like a world where people can just do stuff regardless of their gender or their race? Like, that's what we're going for. And what's so frustrating to me as someone who believes in things like equality and diversity and all that is how this clique of people have weaponized it in such a way
because they don't care about
they don't care about these issues.
It's kind of like a social shibboleth where they basically use these words to kind of gain acceptance into
and status and power, and they can be bullies and they can trample all over anybody. A lot of them are just the bullies from high school. Now now they're just like acting like they have the fucking social the social justice high ground.
Well, they
don't actually care.
They got bullied, and then they found
no. I think they are bullies.
I'm just gonna say, like in school, they were getting bullied, and now
I think in school they were the bullies.
You really
they were the bullies in school. Yeah. Absolutely.
You think guys
they weren't the aggrieved nerds? No, they were the bullies then, and they have now co-opted.
You think a guy like Nathan Grayson was a bully in high school?
Absolutely. I'm sure he was. I bet he was the backstabbing bully type.
I don't know specifically.
I don't know Nathan Grayson. I can't speak about that. But I really genuinely think that a lot of people have come into nerd spaces to co-opt them from actual people who were bullied in high school, and they are bullies. And they've always been bullies their whole life. You don't just become the
reason why I agree with Eric is because a lot of the really obvious cues is like the level of narcissism and the level of kind of self-importance that comes from.
But you find that level of narcissism in people that have been ostracized.
I don't think that's the people who are writing this kind of stuff.
Okay, maybe not.
The people who are outcasts, these aren't outcasts. These are people who have every privilege in the world, and then they act like they're the victims. No, these are people who have always had social power.
And that's the other thing. I think that
they have always had social influence,
and it upsets them when that power and especially more important, the feed of attention that they get, which they need, is interrupted in some way, because they seem to think that this is a way that they can get adulation from people. But the problem is,
and they're riding this wave.
Gamers is that they don't give that. They're not
right. They're not actually part of that. They never were part of this group. They're invaders. And I am like not a gatekeeper, right? Like I am all for like anybody who wants to be a gamer, be a gamer. Anybody who wants to be part of nerd culture, be it. But don't come in here and try to like change it so that you can look good. Yeah. And half the time these people come in. Oh man, I swear to God, half the time that these people come in with their on their pedestal talking about social justice stuff, half of these fuckers are doing some shady shit behind.
Half of them are predators.
They are, they really are like these. I'm all for. Okay, again, I'm all for like the basic idea of feminism, which is that women are equal to men. But a lot of these male feminists, I swear to God, are
just an in because they can't get laid. So the easiest way for them to think they can get laid is by being an ally. And then the moment they can try to get in that ass, they're going to try. So that's what they do.
I know. They're creepy.
But the big things that they're trying to virtue signal, like the shibboleth that they're using, whenever those values change to fit in, that's what they will use. They don't actually care about any of
there's no belief there.
It's purely about saying the right thing to fit in with the group that they want to fit in with.
So, and not just fit in with them, but have influence over that group, have social standing in that group, and then to also, I mean, I don't know how many times I've been like tried to they've tried to kill me so many times, man. Not literally, but like I know totally, and like they never have been able to because they don't got jack shit on me, man. But like they try. And they try because their whole modus operandi is to find an enemy and then destroy them so they can look good.
So the problem that they're using is that they're trying to use like a weird form of applied postmodernism, which is basically my subjective truth is supersedes objective reality. The
Yes.
problem why that doesn't work, for the obvious reason, is that objective reality exists.
Is
subjective truth
objectively real.
Right. So if they do try and cancel people, this is why a lot of these sort of cancellations or trying to go after people tend to, I mean, they're deeply unpleasant because you're getting
yeah, it's horrible. Yeah.
But you're not, nothing really changes in an objective reality sense. I mean, in my experience, like I've been so many times I've had these people come after me, and it's just ridiculous because they don't understand what they're doing, and they're operating in a kind of this weird, hyper fake bubble of stuff that doesn't exist. So no, I mean, I think one of the reasons why you and I have walked away from a lot of this stuff is partly because yes, they've got nothing on you. And they're normally really terrible people, you know, as Jason says, like most of them are predators. You know, like they're incredibly hypocritical. And also the main thing is like it doesn't match up with what's happening in the real world where we all live.
Right.
And honestly, and you talk about reality. Well, the reality exists, and if it's not just the articles omitting the truth and actual timeline of events, it's like whenever they're called out on it, they can't even take criticism, and that's when they try to shift the narrative and frame it in a different way.
Well, they don't want to talk about it.
But that is a classic small narcissist. They always
and this happens with all of them, and then they you know, tweet as if they're being harassed, and there mentions this, and they try to take
and
this
sometimes
very
that's
small,
true. I mean, harassment on Twitter is very common.
Online, they try to take this very small minority of people that are unhinged, which is a lot. I mean, there is a lot of people online, and every movement there is online of anything, there's always this certain sect of people who take it too far. They generally have horrible grammar and have anime avatars,
like bad social skills.
Hey, leave the anime fans out of this. They're all right.
I already showed you my VHS Escaflowne. You know I'm one of them. Just saying. And that is who they say, oh, it's all of these people.
That's everybody.
Doing it. Yeah. Never mind the 80% of people are just like, listen, just tell the truth. You know, like just be honest about what is going on. But they can't do that because if they were honest, were honest, everyone would see through this facade, and it belies the whole truth of why Sweet Baby got this bad narrative. From what the CEO has said, a lot of former employees have said, just heinous, blatantly racist things. And it's like, you know, people have had enough. I really feel like it's, and they still think they have all this power when I think the pendulum is starting to swing. And the reason they can't get you, Eric, is because you articulate, you do weigh both sides, which I think at the beginning of any attack or dogpile, that doesn't work. You know, the stamp, but if you just maintain that narrative, the truth does come out to people that are actually paying attention, to people that matter. And that's why you eventually just pop your head back up out of water. I mean, it has to work like that. As long as you keep going and you're strong. Some people just give up and
that's the thing is what they hope is by bullying you that you'll shut up, and then that's how
you silence. That's right.
Yeah. Right. So as long as you don't do that, then you're fine.
You get tired though. You do get tired. I won't lie. That's kind of what I was joking around about earlier. Like PTSD. Sometimes I get so tired of like the bullshit and. But I remember during Gamergate, what's his Alex Baldwin?
Oh yeah, what was it?
Yeah, yeah, from like Firefly. Yeah, he was the one who coined the term Gamergate on Twitter. Actually, we were DMing, and he said, "Be a happy warrior."
Yeah, that's where you got that from. That's right,
and that's where I got that from. And I thought that's something I need to remember, and I always try to remind myself. I mean, and I don't even agree with a lot of his, like, he's very right wing. I'm a lefty. But I do think like
it doesn't matter.
Yeah. I mean, like I'm a lefty, but I'm so disappointed in the left, you know,
you can never be pure enough. That's the problem.
You can never. Yes. It's the Monty Python Life of Brian scene, you know, splitters. That whole movie is so relevant. Watch Life of Brian. It's amazingly relevant to all the issues of today.
That also has my favourite joke in any film, which is when there's a whole group of people who says, "You are all different," and everyone screams, "We're all different," and then one guy goes, "I'm not," That is the best book ever written.
That's a great movie.
But no, the one thing I wanted to go back to, the point you talked about gatekeeping. I mean, physically, it's actually impossible. So the weird people that are actually gatekeeping in terms of the cliques are actually these journalists, because they're not allowing people in unless you speak the right words. The actual fandom, it's actually impossible to gatekeep fandom. And it's interesting you bring up Escaflowne, because back in the day when I used to watch Escaflowne, before it was ever released anywhere outside of Japan, I had to get fan subs in the UK on VHS from somebody who recorded it on Laserdisc, use an Amiga, and then put subtitles.
The things we used to do.
How old I am, but the important thing is I had to be a member of an anime club to get access to those tapes. And literally, the guys in charge of that would gatekeep, like, who they liked would get the VHS tapes, who they didn't like wouldn't get it. Now, that's completely not the case. If anyone wants to watch
no barrier.
If anybody wants to play Elden Ring, if anyone wants to play Armored Core 6, they can do that right now. They can buy it and they can, play it and enjoy it. And then they're part of that fandom if they want to be. So the thing you've got to be careful about is that when these fandoms start getting big, like with gaming, you get a lot of narcissists and sociopaths that kind of come in and try and colonize it. Now, basically, you're not gatekeeping them if you're not allowing them to take control. It's not theirs to control. It's not mine to control. It's not anyone fans to control. Right. So the thing about gatekeeping is it's like, I don't think any fan that is wary of someone that's trying to kind of destroy their hobby, that's not gatekeeping. Because you physically can't stop them from entering or not entering the fandom. But if you don't want them to be a leader, that's something else entirely. That's not gatekeeping.
That's politics, man.
Yes, right. That you actually have to win people over. You can't just sort of bully them. So
I mean, but that is the approach that seems to be happening. I mean, and they will. And what's amazing is, like, I swear to God, cherry picking is like their main strategic move.
They always argue.
Oh, look, somebody harassed a woman in a game.
Right.
Dude, I don't even have game chat on ever in multiplayer games. I just have it on with my buddies because I can't listen to half the people you find online. They've got music playing, babies crying. They're saying racist shit. Like, I don't want to hear that. So I just turn it off and just don't engage. But you can find clips of people being sexist or racist or whatever you want all the time, of course, constantly. But that doesn't mean that gamers in general don't want women in games. No, it just means that there's some assholes out there. Like, there are assholes everywhere.
Yes.
But it's like, listen, going back to what we originally started with, like, aren't we? It would be wonderful. We get to the place. Ollie mentioned, a lot of women in the gaming industry in Japan. That's just the way it is. It's part of the culture. Blah blah blah. But it would be like that here if it wasn't that every single time a woman does it. Look at this. The first time a woman led cast is this, and it's like,
so patronizing.
Then, or recently, it's like you see these people who just make up these arguments. Honestly, like, I would like to give them the credit that they're doing it for traffic and revenue. I honestly don't think they're that smart. I actually think most of these people think this. Like, they'll put pictures of, like, Sigourney Weaver and all these ages. Imagine if this came out in 2024.
I saw that. I was actually going to make a video about that.
People
they had a video. That tweet was it was Ripley from Alien.
Yeah.
It was Vasquez from Aliens. It was Princess Leia from Star Wars, and I can't remember the other female character. And they're like, imagine how people would react today. And, like, for one thing, first of all, sexism was worse.
Yes,
in the late 70s and early 80s, just objectively worse. There was more sexism. People liked those characters because they were well written, and there are many characters in modern shows that. I'm sorry. Was there a big controversy around the show Arcane on Netflix? A female-led show? Were any of the fucking horrible sexist nerds freaking out about Arcane? I can't remember that. Why? Because those characters were awesome. Yeah. They were really well-written characters. People didn't hate She-Hulk because it had women in it. They hated She-Hulk because they were written fucking horribly. And because their idea of a strong woman is to just shit on men.
That's right.
I'm sorry. Strong women don't just shit on men. Just like strong men don't just shit on women, unless that's what you like in the bedroom, I guess. But, like, I'm sorry. Like,
this is now going into where I don't want to.
No, I'm sorry. But there has never been, like, in my personal, like, I've never thought a strong man is someone who treats women badly.
Yeah.
But somehow in modern times, it's like a strong woman has to treat men badly. No, that's toxic, man.
I will also
what we like about people like Ripley is that they're not perfect, but they have qualities that we admire. Like there are so many great female characters out there, but they're great because they're written with a complex range of characteristics and beliefs and values.
Yeah.
And not just like, oh, they can beat up a man and men are bad. And it's like, come on, guys.
One sec, Ollie. And you mentioned how other media don't actively attack their fan base, which is absolutely true. But you see it now when like the female-led Ghostbusters comes out. And then all of a sudden it is this fictitious boogeyman of alt-right men that just hate this movie. No, the movie just fucking sucked. Like it just sucked. And I'm sorry you made a shitty movie. And that movie, if it was men, would have just been equally shitty with the same writing. It doesn't. And it's like they keep making these things up that to drum up. And then of course it stirs up the hornet's nest. And they look, the people come out and they talk about it, they tweet it, the comments start, look, see, this is exactly what the problem was. And it's not true at all. It's a smoke screen of bullshit.
It is. It is totally a smokescreen. I mean, there are so many. So again, I'm doing more television than gaming these days. But like, I've recently watched Sharp Objects on HBO.
I like
Amy Adams starred in that.
Excellent.
She was fantastic. Female-led show, absolutely fantastic. I just finished Happy Valley, which is a British crime detective show. I thought the main actress in that put on one of the best performances I've ever seen in my life. Just absolutely fucking phenomenal. Wonderful show. But then I read a negative review of True Detective Night Country, and I'm a misogynistic, I just hate women, da-da-da-da-da. It's like, this is the constant narrative that we're thrown at, that's thrown at us, and anyone who criticizes anything. And it's like, but maybe it's just bad writing, and you're using diversity and inclusion and all that stuff as a shield. And the corporations who are publishing this stuff, whether it's games or whether it's HBO, Time Warner, whatever, they are using diversity as a shield, as armor from criticism.
And that seems
it's fucked up. It's fucked up. It's actually insulting
discussion. It does seem that you could talk about forced. I know a lot of people have issues with forced diversity. How do you even, label that? A lot of people just latch onto things that they don't like and call it under that umbrella. Again, it's just as disingenuous as the fictitious, alt-right men who tank Ghostbusters. It's the same nonsense. But you do seem these things like sometimes that pop up, and it's like, does that have to do with the DEI? I mean, DEI in and of itself is this harmless phrase, which a lot of this progressivism is, these harmless terms and stuff. But underneath there is this nastiness, this hierarchy that is trying to enforce on people. And I mean, you see it prevalent with these people who are writing these articles. Alyssa McConaughey, you can't be really racist to white people. It's just, it seems to go.
I love that.
And this is all belied with this DEI narrative.
I can tell you there are definitely people who are racist to white people.
Well, like Japan in and of itself, they have no problem putting it on some restaurants, only Japan only, or something to that effect. Like it's just, there's something to this stuff, and people can overblow it, or you can talk about it rationally. But I mean, I can still like the games and still find issues with some stuff. Like God of War Ragnarok. They worked on God of War Ragnarok. Angrboda was race swapped. There wasn't any black people in Norse mythology. Does it really bother me about that? Absolutely not. But then you get to the worst part of that game, which is like a 2-hour slogfest that destroys the pacing of it, that just happens to feature this character. And it's like, would that not have come out in play tests? Why was it kept in? You can ask these questions over and over and over again. And why was it there? But
I'm going to say this. I am bothered by historical inaccuracy in games and media. Like in Vikings Valhalla on Netflix, there's one of the chieftains, Jarls or whatever, is a black woman.
Wouldn't exist.
Who's a historical character who is actually a white man. I mean, I think to me, that bothers me because, like, you look at Shogun, the show Shogun, right? What's his face who plays the main
Toranaga. No, you're talking about Hiroyuki Sanada.
He said, he wasn't going to do this unless they hired Japanese actors to play.
Because he's a producer on parts. Well, by the way.
And I think that's great. I think that's absolutely right. That's the right way. You do a historical thing, you should have historical accuracy. But why is it okay to randomly have a black woman play a Viking Jarl? That's just unrealistic. But and it just makes no fucking sense to me.
One last thing before you jump in, Ollie, I just say, and it doesn't go both ways, because if a predominantly black character was race swapped to a white person, the shit would just absolutely blow up. It
should blow up.
Fair enough, but
it shouldn't be right.
This stuff only goes one way.
Right.
And
it does.
I know what people say, listen to the three old white men talk about this
absolutely
stuff, but I'm sorry.
Absolutely.
It's not it's reality. I'm commenting on something. You can say that all you want, but these things are literally happening, and they're not happening in the other way.
So the thing that's interesting about all this for me, because I live in Tokyo and I'm very much separate from culturally America, UK these days.
Lucky you.
Is that when I look in on this stuff, a lot of it is really specific to the US, UK, really. It's not
the Anglo.
It's not
Canada. It's just as bad here, if not worse.
Yeah, but no one's US, Canada, UK. I mean, I don't really see anyone. So when the Ghostbusters movie came out, it didn't do well in Japan because it was crap, and there was none of this argument about men not liking women. And also strong women don't have to destroy men. There's none of that in Japan. It just makes no sense. So culturally, I suppose if you're in the middle of it, it feels like it's the rest of the world. But from the outside, it's a really kind of specific pocket of culture.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
And the other thing that's also really interesting about Shogun, which is kind of like a flip side thing, was like the original adaptation of that when they did in the 80s was kind of a bit of a mixed bag. And I think a lot of that was down to... So what's interesting about Shogun, I think, as a story, is that they're trying to basically tell how Tokugawa came to power, basically. And part of that is true because there were, an English guy there, William Adams. But the thing that's really interesting is the way that the story was written. It was written from like an Australian-British guy who basically came at it from an outsider looking in, which is exactly the right way to basically write about this story from like a Westerner's perspective. But the reason why I think this new one works so well is that Sanada... first of all, Sanada actually worked for the Royal Shakespeare Company. He won it. He was awarded an MBE in Britain for his performances.
He's amazing.
He's an amazing actor.
Absolutely phenomenal. Yeah.
He's one of my favorite Japanese actors, bar none. And he is also a producer on the series, and he's bringing what is in Japan it's called Jidaigeki, which is kind of period drama. He's bringing a lot of that expertise and know-how from those dramas into a Western show, so it feels like the right mix of it's a Western perspective from Blackthorne's. By the way, the guy who plays Blackthorne is absolutely spot on British naval officer.
Yeah, I love him.
He's amazing.
Cosmo Jarvis. Yeah, he's great.
His accent.
Yeah, Cosmo Jarvis.
So good.
Oh, anyway, he's great. Everyone's great. The casting is so perfect in that show.
And anyway, so the whole point, the reason why it works, I think, is because you've got this. It's the stories from Blackthorne's perspective, so it is kind of like a foreigner in a very alien land. But then you have this undercurrent and foundation of authenticity that the original adaptation, even though the original adaptation had Toshiro Mifune in it, this is like a really authentic depiction of. The only thing I always find weird is when they start talking about the eightfold fence, because it's like technically I know. So in Japan, that's kind of what they're referring to. I think is Honeto Tatemaya, which is like your personal self and your private self, and they don't really mix. And I think that's kind of what they're getting at, but I don't know where this... Maybe it's a Confucian philosophical thing that I'm not aware of, or maybe it's a historical thing, but generally, if you talk about it in modern sense, it's, I mean, I talked to my friends.
It's probably just
eightfold fence, and they went, "What the fuck is?"
It's probably some writers that were just like trying to do something they thought was cool,
It sounds more like Chinese philosophy. We're not the
I think like for an audience, I think it worked. I think it works for what they're trying to do. But
the way that Mariko explains it, it's like who I am individually and who I am publicly are not the same person.
Yeah,
and that you always have to kind of protect your inner self and what you really feel.
Yeah,
and how you really react. Which is actually to be honest, that's just a generally good advice as being a human being.
Right.
It doesn't necessarily.
I love her character too.
But there are some bad things if you take it too far, which is kind of what Blackthorne is getting at. that, this kind of extremism of, literal sort of rule following, which is, you found in like the last episode where they kill the gardener because they misinterpreted his intentions massively.
This cultural clash, this language barrier, all of that came out, into this horrible outcome.
One thing I absolutely love about Shogun, though, like especially in the new episodes, is like when Mariko just gets angry at Blackthorn, she mistranslates him on purpose.
Yeah.
And what I really hope is that, because they're releasing it on Disney Plus in Japan, what I really hope is that stuff is translated so that people understand that Japanese translators are generally, or can be, quite dishonest.
And here we get into
the
localization.
Yes.
Which I'm just gonna take 1 minute. I have to run outside real fast, but I'll be right back. You guys carry on.
Okay.
Sorry, Jason, what are you gonna say?
I completely forgot. I wanted to wrap up this sweet baby thing because, I mean, the truth is, I know what you're saying. A lot of it, you live in it. It seems to be this massive thing. To me, it's kind of irrelevant, other than I just can't stand when people don't tell the truth. It really bothers me, but I can't control that. You know what I mean?
No.
I don't, with these consultancy groups, I guess. Oh, I remember what I wanted to say now. Getting old, man. I don't know how old you are, Ollie. I'll be 45 next month. I have 2 young ones, and my brain is just fried half the time. I can't believe I remember some of the things I do. But what I was going to say is, if you are, consulting groups exist. The truth is, a lot of people really out there, gamers, quote unquote, don't know how the pie is made. And to that extent, I don't think a lot of games media actually know how the pie is made either. They claim they do, but a lot of them have no clue about how games are made.
I can tell you they have no clue. Absolutely no clue.
It's an extremely difficult, intricate process. You don't know who is consulting on what, who is advising on what, who is running what. These teams are big. And it's a lot of moving parts
because games like are heavily iterative. So yes, I would have worked on stuff on Fortnite when I was at Epic, but other people worked on it as well. So it becomes kind of an amalgamation of the work of multiple people. So trying to have this kind of auteur, understanding, or when you attribute one person to the creation of a game, for example, that is
if it's a nice way to sell, but it's not accurate. But my one thing I wanted to say to dovetail to finish this discussion is, these things exist, but it's kind of telling that after all this has backfired, this Sweet Baby Inc. are completely wiping their website about games they've worked on. A lot of people are hiding their tracks to the fact that they're even with this company or previously worked with this company. There's something off about a lot of this stuff. And I mean, I don't really want to get into it, but how far do the ESG dollars affect, people taking on these DEI consultancies and venture capital money? I've listened to guys break it down. Whether that's accurate or not is beyond the scope of my intelligence. And the fact is, I don't care all that much unless something was to break, and then I would comment on it. But it's just, I can't stand this dishonesty that seems to be prevalent. All these things have that in common. Misrepresentation of the truth, which offers a backlash, which offers another backlash, and more misframing, and off to the races we go. So honestly, fuck them all.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, like the ESG DEI stuff in gaming is actually a very, very, very small thing. It doesn't have the impact on it. I understand why people are upset about what they think has happened, but in honesty, the impact of it is actually a lot smaller. I think the bad thing that happened was that they basically tried to shut it down, or shut someone down, and then attack gamers for being evil again, which is, they're not, and you're handling it very badly. The thing that actually frustrates me more about because there's a lot of consultancy, right? But the thing that frustrates me much more, really, and we're kind of skipping over to another topic, which is actually the most important thing, really, is to do with what's happening with all the gaming layoffs in development, and the fact that publishers are not being held accountable. So the thing is as Eric knows, I've been writing about excessive gaming development budgets since about 2015. I've been warning about it, saying bad stuff's going to come down the line when it hits. And there's about a 5 to 10 year lead time on big AAA games because of the amount of time it takes to make big games. And the money layer, partly because of other events that are happening in the world, are getting sketchy when it comes to investing hundreds of millions of dollars in a ridiculously expensive game that hires hundreds and hundreds of people. So
that the kids don't even want to play. They want to go play Lethal Company. They want to go play Pal World. They don't,
But you're right. But the thing that's really bad is that the people that made these decisions are all in publishing. And they are the ones that went after what they think are big bucks because they're greedy. And all of the people that are suffering because of that now are the developers who are the people who make the games. And Sven Vink from Larian, who did Baldur's Gate 3, has now been trashing AAA publishers and the management of publishers, very, very rightly so, because they are the cause of the problem. What really frustrates me about this is that the people that cause the problem are not the ones being punished for it, and the developers are the ones that are basically getting hammered. And that, for me, is tragic because of all the sort of institutional knowledge and expertise that has been built up over decades is gone now. And the thing is
well, it's not gone.
Well, it's gone.
It has to find a new home.
But that's the problem. They can't.
Yeah.
And part of the problem at the moment is trying to get any investment for a new studio is like trying to get blood from a stone. So it's almost impossible for a lot of these developers to actually set up a new studio so that their expertise isn't lost. We're losing an enormous amount of knowledge and expertise and skill over the past year or two, really. And to me, even though, yes, it's annoying when a tiny consultancy company attacks a tiny guy for covering what they do and then attacking gamers, that the last bit actually upsets me the most. But the thing
that's just drama, though. It's not life and death.
But it's not life and death. But I mean, there are a lot of people, but what's happening to the games industry and specifically game development and the creative side of game creation is actually, I mean, I knew the fallout was going to be bad. I didn't think it would be this stupid.
It's insane.
Because the fact that publishers, because Sven
could have been avoided and mitigated. I should say mitigated, not avoided.
The thing is what Sven Vink basically said was that you fire all your developers, and then in a year you go, shit, I need to hire more developers, but they're all gone now. They've all moved to other
different jobs.
Yeah, and he says you're losing that institutional knowledge, which you are, and that is such. I can't even begin to explain the cultural travesty that is occurring.
Even when I was much younger, I worked at an ice cream cone factory. Kind of an interesting job, right? But I talked to the CEO of that company, and he asked me, "Do you think it costs more money to keep someone on or to hire someone new?" And his explanation was, it's so much more expensive and time consuming to have to hire someone new. And when you're looking at this industry right now, laying off so many people, I mean, just they're going to need a lot. Like, it's crazy. It's just madness from a business perspective.
And the people,
it's so expensive to train and bring up people. And
a lot of the people that they're letting go are normally the ones that have the highest salaries, and the ones with the highest salaries,
but they have the skill and knowledge.
They normally have a lot more experience, skill, and expertise, which are the stuff that you absolutely need when you have to figure out a new pipeline for, your technical art, all the technical artist pipeline. So it's
and there's a balance, right? Like you obviously can't just keep the old guard around forever and not have anybody new come in, because new ideas and new people are great too. But just like, if you're like, well, again, I worked at a bookstore once, and the owner's policy was pretty much, when it came time for you to qualify for benefits, out you go. They hire somebody new. And it's like this idea that why are you laying people off? You're trying to cut costs because they have higher salaries? Well, you're going to lose so much of what makes your business work. You can't just hire a bunch of fucking newbies. Yeah. You can't just keep, you have to have a natural.
And this is why what's happening in Japan is really interesting, is because they didn't spend crazy amount on budgets. We haven't seen the size of layoffs. And
look at that Godzilla movie.
But aren't Japan's employment laws a lot different?
That's one I was going to get. The other point to that is but the thing is, a lot of Japanese employees aren't permanent employees. If you're a permanent employee, you are it's very difficult to fire someone. But most of the kind of the art people that they work with tend to be working on a freelance, but they haven't let them go. They're still working with them. And the main reason for that is basically the budgets in Japan is like they use a thimble full of money to make something nice. I mean, you can extend this to the movie industry. Godzilla -1.
That's what I was saying. Godzilla -1 is
cost
fantastic.
About $15 million and won the Oscar for best special effects, which is
incredible. I have not wanted to see a Godzilla movie in ages, and I went to it and I thought, wow, this is just an incredible movie. And you know what it was? It was, well, first of all, they were very clever about their special effects, and second of all, it had a really good story, which none of our American Godzillas have had.
Yeah,
I like King of Monsters, but then the humans get in the way. But
I mean, the big problem that we have is that the publisher management are greedy and they spend too much money, but don't take any responsibility.
Well, and that's what I was going to talk about.
When they lose money, which is all the time. And
all the time.
The thing is like the reality is from someone who works in Japan and has worked abroad, technically and creatively, I do think Western developers are way ahead of how Japan works from a production standpoint. It's just that Japan spends a lot less money. So the thing that I've been trying to do, and kind of the open secret of the Japanese games industry of the last 10, 15 years, is that a lot of the reasons why Japanese games have somehow caught up is because a lot of international staff work on those games. To kind of blow your mind a little bit, Eric, the engine for Dark Souls 2 is exactly the same engine for Bloodborne. And the only reason, right? Well, no, not Havoc. Havoc only did the physics, the internal engine.
Oh, okay.
The only reason that game looks so good is because international staff basically managed to optimize their graphical pipeline.
Interesting.
So, and that is something that, that's again how the sausage is made. So people don't really know about that. But generally, there's a technical gap between the West, which is far more advanced, generally speaking, and Japan, which is now playing catch up. I mean, this is also true because a lot of them are using Unreal and they're trying to catch up with Western development. So, but the problem is that the reason why it all comes apart in the West is basically publishing budgets are just too high. And the reason why Larian managed to do a really good game with Baldur's Gate 3 is they kept the budget low and they self-published. So they didn't have any external publisher interference from the top down, which is the worst kind that you can have in game development because it's incredibly expensive. Because they're not at the coalface, they don't know how things have been built. It's not like a movie where you can do reshoots. It's like the other way around. You're like building a house, right? And then, you build a bungalow, and at the last minute, we want a helipad. It doesn't work like that. You have to have the foundation from the beginning and then build up through it. With the movies, you can just add whatever you want, like in some kind of Franken-monster mess. So, the biggest problem primarily is publishing management. And generally, I wish a lot of developers would just self-publish because that would cut out so much of the incompetence that basically is fundamentally shielded in publishing because they never take responsibility for the mistakes they make.
I mean, that goes hand in hand. The reason people don't self-publish is because they need money to finish their games in a lot of different times.
This is what's clever about Larian, and this is what was clever about CD Projekt Red. Well, CD Projekt Red's a bit different, and I hope From Software go this route, is that with Larian, they worked up with things like Divinity, and they worked the money they got from that, and then they stockpiled it, and then they just kind of built up over time, which the Divinity games are bloody amazing. So totally. They use that money to basically effectively self-fund and self-publish. That's a long game, thing. With CD Projekt Red, they created GOG, and that basically pays for everything. So, and also I suppose with Valve and Steam as well.
Yeah, I was going to say it's very, very similar to Valve.
Yeah,
on a different scale, but
so there are. You're right. Though, a lot of people,
bit. Yeah,
a lot of people need money, definitely, but there are ways of earning money in a way that you kind of are allowed to kind of keep your game development soul intact.
Yeah.
The problem is getting on that ladder is now more than ever is absolutely impossible, which is the real shame right now. I mean, your point about, they need money, that's absolutely true. There is a way around that, but unfortunately, where we are now, especially with what's happening in the Ukraine, and what's happening with Israel, like the money layer, the investment layer that deals with all of the kind of, back-end finances are very, very skittish, even though gaming is a huge industry. They don't have that kind of...
Well, and look at what happens also with money. You get Embracer Group. You get acquisitions, and then you get massive shutdown. How many times have we seen somebody buy this company, buys the studios, buys the IP, does all this stuff, and then boom, huge layoffs, cancellations. Nothing comes from all that money.
No,
it's somebody makes a lot of money, but the actual outcome is
so Embrace is a weird one, but you're really right about that. Is that a lot of these acquisitions normally end up in a really bad way. What's happening to Bungie now at Sony, I actually feel sorry for. Though to be fair, the Bungie management is kind of known to be a bit a law unto themselves. But I
think Bungie was better under Activision, honestly. But
well, to be honest, I don't think it necessarily was an Activision thing. I think the management was a very different beast then. And I think there were some people on the board that were controlling more of what was happening in a more normal way. But now there's a lot of divas involved. So I think also Sony kind of stupidly has this thing where they kind of hire people based on... They kind of like to make divas of people. Like they want to have this singular person that is in charge, and they lionize these individuals, and they've done it over and over again. They did it with Hello Games and No Man's Sky. They made this guy out to be like some kind of the next
Sean Murphy.
Yeah, not a good guy, by the way.
I remember a little email exchange we had that got that made some news headlines, actually.
Really?
Sean. Oh yeah, when that's a whole other story, but yes.
Okay. So I know him a bit because I joined a studio called Double Six about 6 months after he left. And he left because he basically was trashing the game, and then he got really upset that we managed to get the game out and it was good. So he's not a nice guy, like quite Schadenfreude kind of type. But anyway, but the whole thing with that, I mean, to kind of digress, is that with Sony, I mean, it's just like they like to lionize people, and I think the mistake is they blew smoke up the arse of the Bungie management, and it's kind of gone really badly wrong. But I think the people that are kind of going to get it really badly are the developers on Bungie, who are actually pretty good. So I actually feel sorry for them. But yeah, you're right. These acquisitions are never a good thing, but they're great from again, the money layer loves it because it looks like they're building their portfolio, and that kind of stuff is, that they get very, like, the money layer gets very excited when you build a portfolio like that, of studios and IP and all this kind of stuff.
But you just see it so often in business in general, not just games, but when companies seem to go public or big and boards have says, they hire people that don't have the passion, and you see these decisions being made with obviously the game's best interest. It's just a money decision, and you can say, of course, end game is all about money, but you make great, like Larian's a wonderful example, and you're going to make
this is
money by being passionate about what you're doing. Yes, sometimes creative doesn't mix with business, but it's not just a catch-all statement. You can involve people who still have a passion for it that are a little bit better. That's like you run a restaurant. You can't have one guy do everything. You know what I mean?
So the thing is you still need the business sense to temper the creative craziness.
Of course,
the balance.
No, I completely agree with that.
The problem at the moment is the balance is way over on the business side.
And like
this is what we're talking about.
Responsibility never seems to fall on their shoulders for anything.
This
Even
is
obvious, like the biggest example is the overhiring during COVID, when anyone with a brain knew this wasn't a thing that was going to last. But again,
it's like streaming.
When you're operating businesses on quarterlies to get results, there are short-term decisions that, long-term be damned. It doesn't matter about the human cost. These people don't care, and they're not going to be liable for it when the guillotine falls. So,
well, this reminds me of, we were talking about Dragon's Dogma before the podcast started, and Dragon's Dogma 2, so far, I freaking love it. It's amazing. I'm having such a good time. But the big controversy is this DLC, and there's like 15 different things you can buy for real money, and a lot of them impact gameplay. And this so clearly is a decision from corporate, from the business side. And they so clearly misjudged how this would be, how this would play out with the consumers and the optics that this would create. So instead of like the story about Dragon's Dogma 2 being like, holy shit, what a great RPG, this is amazing. Instead, the story is horse armor DLC Like, you know, like it's they're charging $2.99 for a rift stone or a port crystal, like a warp stone. And, and that's where this balance gets so fucked up. It's like, and I think in some ways, like we've seen it done pretty well. Like I don't know. It's like we moved away from loot boxes. We moved towards battle passes. Now, battle passes are better than loot boxes. But also, it's like the live service model is very unsustainable. I can't play 10 different live service games and have 10 different battle passes. Like, I don't know. It's got to be, and just to like be empathetic, it's got to be hard to make it work.
It is. Right? It's incredibly difficult.
Incredibly difficult to make that balance.
Games as a service is exhausting for development.
Yeah.
So, but the thing that I was going to sort of say was that oh god, I've lost my train of thought now. What was it?
I have to.
Sven Bink was saying about
those dirty bastards at publishing company.
Yeah, well, it's this is the point you're making. Your money matters, but the thing is it's whenever it's anything ever creative, it's never just about the money. The creative side matters as much as the business side. It has to work together. And the problem is if you just focus on the money, you will destroy the literal goose that lays the golden egg.
Right.
So, and this is the problem that the games industry is now facing, because we're now coming to the end of this AAA nonsense, basically, because it's
just like the streaming business in Netflix and all that, where we see huge cuts to budgets that were way out of control.
Yes.
It's the same thing. Everyone got real crazy with these budgets. It's got to end somewhere.
But the problem at the moment is the people that are taking the brunt of that are the people that didn't make those decisions in the first place. And
most
the consequences of the people that we're losing it's not going to be immediately obvious in the next 2-3 years, but 5-10 years from now, I'm going to be banging on about this budget stuff forever and no one listens. But yeah, it's going to be really bad. I think we're going to, one thing that I thought was interesting was Lorne Lanning's response, like how this happens now is that everything's going to be like much smaller, more focused, more efficient game development teams. And I would agree with him almost 100% if it was not for the fact that it's impossible to get investment.
Well, that's a thorn. That's a wrinkle in the whole plan.
Absolutely right. The people that are really experienced that have been let go, if they had some seed money to just make something cool, you would see some amazing games come. But I honestly don't think that will ever happen, because the problem with the money layer is they want big returns, right?
Right.
And the problem with video games is where it thrives is what I call the mid-tier budget, right? It's what the PlayStation 2 had. It's just, there's no such thing as a game for everyone, only a game for each and everyone. So my PlayStation 2 library is probably completely different from your PlayStation 2 library. But the money layer doesn't like that. They don't like that level of variety. They want homogeneity. They want monolithic games. They want monolithic returns. So
that's PlayStation in a nutshell right there, right now. Third person, like everything has to be The Last of Us now. Even God of War, even, everything has to be this one type of
Which
game.
Is ironic, because the PlayStation 2 and the PlayStation was probably the systems that birthed this kind of much more sustainable mid-tier model, and was actually responsible for the fact that or the PlayStation 2 especially, ended up becoming the most successfully selling console of all time. I mean, it's still... It's like 155 million or something insane.
It's huge. So, it's insane.
And that, again, is because of the mid-tier. It's not AAA. It never was AAA. AAA was just Microsoft trying to get into the games industry. And
well, sure. And that's why you see on PC, like, the success of mid-tier on Steam.
Yeah.
Or games, like my son plays,
I'd say it's more on the Switch, because with PC...
Sure, Switch too.
With PC, the problem with PC is that you can go crazy in terms of how much you spend on the art and the graphics from a development standpoint.
But what I'm talking about is like what I see the kids playing. Like, look at games like Among Us or Lethal Company or I mean, shit, Minecraft is still huge. Like games that are not like super graphically intensive, but they're fun to play. And I think a lot of the games that like my kids play on like are not like these big, huge, massive AAA games. Like Gang Beasts and shit, Goat Simulator. Like that's what the kids want. Yeah. They don't cost that much money to make, but they love those games. Like that's what they play. But they also play Mortal Kombat and stuff. But
generally from a Japanese standpoint, it's like everything is about the Switch, and the Switch is kind of coming up to PlayStation 2 sold. And again, their approach is mid-tier. Although I wish they were kind of a bit more discerning about their indie content, which I would also say probably for Steam as well, because there's a lot of really
we expect it from Steam, but we don't expect it from like we the PC is a Wild West, right? We know that. The consoles were always supposed to be a little bit more locked down, and the Switch is kind of just I don't know. Also, I'm just gonna say it. I don't like the Switch. The Joy-Con drift has completely ruined it for me. Every single one of my Switches, which I probably own 4 or 5,
did you have an OLED one?
Nope, I won't buy it.
So that one has it basically fixed. So I
don't care anymore. I bought enough of them already.
So I went from the launch one, which definitely had really bad Joy-Con drift, and then when Metroid Dread came out, I switched over to the OLED. And I've never had any Joy-Con drift since.
Okay.
I also use the Pro pads a lot when I'm on the TV, and that's
great.
amazing. That's my favorite gaming pad of the last 10 years. I feel it's really comfortable.
It's great.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Finish what you're saying.
Yeah. No. So the Joy-Con drift on the OLED switches. I mean, I don't know if it's completely gone, but it's definitely a lot better. So
okay, well, I'm just going to wait for the next Switch. I think at this point,
and that will have Joy-Con drift too. So
yeah, even more drifty than before. Woo!
So speaking of the Switch and PlayStation, we've seen PlayStation really start to fall in terms of popularity in Japan. I guess my big question. Yeah. Well, I mean,
the Switch is just so much bigger in Japan.
Yeah, but even like it's PlayStation just isn't. I mean, based on the numbers that I'm seeing, it's not as popular at all. Now, is it because of a falling out of love in the brand? I know Sony PlayStation has basically moved all their head offices for the most part to Europe and America. Or is it because of the size? Is it simply just the size of the units? Whereas Japan, everything. Go ahead.
No, I mean, to be honest, I think the problem with the PlayStation 5 is you can't judge it fairly and the Xbox Series X, to be honest, is because of during Corona and when it was released, it massively disrupted the supply line, so it never really reached the momentum that it was meant to do.
Okay.
So a lot of people are like saying with the new Final Fantasy VII that the Rebirth, that's like dropped 90% in sales in the second week. That is the same for every single game.
But that's every game. Yeah, like I feel
every game in Japan. Like Armored Core 6 had exactly the same.
But don't you think like the real thing is that the Switch is just the perfect console for Japanese people? Like that it's mobile, but it's hybrid, that it's like I just feel like that's very, very, very appealing. Like it's
I think yes and no. I think more than anything else is that Nintendo were able to keep making Switches because they used older hardware to make them,
right.
Whereas the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X used next generation hardware, which was far harder to manufacture when the supply lines shut down. So basically, Nintendo had a different supply line, and it really is a lot of,
Well, it's also the nature of the console, though, right? Like I own, like I said, like 4 Switches. Well, why do I own 4 Switches? It's because like when my kids were playing Switch, they could each play their own, right? But I don't own 4 PlayStation 5s. Like, why would I have 4 of those?
That doesn't make any sense. An element of but to be honest, though, I don't really see the Switch in the wild in the same way that I used to see the 3DS or the PS Vita.
Sure.
In Japan.
Yeah.
The Switch. I mean, if I'm playing the Switch on a train, so because I'm in Tokyo and there's a lot of train drives, you can always gauge what is popular gaming because you see people playing games on the train. Most of it is like 100% is almost mobile. It's like everyone's on mobile.
Yeah.
But back in the day, I mean, I almost never see someone playing a Switch. If there's anyone playing a Switch on a train, it's me. So I don't see anyone else. And even when I'm in like nerdy places like Akihabara, which has like a lot of these cafes where you can sit and play, like most people are playing mobile, they're not playing Switch.
But don't you think even in the house, like if you have a household with 3 kids, like,
so in Japan, I think what you're doing in the US, I think it would be incredibly rare in Japan. I don't think you have more than 1 Switch per household. Maybe very, very rare to have, let's say, 2, even if you've got kids. So, and a lot of that is also to do with living space, because it's a lot more limited. That's a big factor.
Very small.
Yeah, it's a very big factor in terms of when you buy new hardware. And I don't think that the size of the PlayStation 5 is that big relative to other stuff that people have in their homes. So it's kind of like a small thing really relative to what other, like, because you have all these like air purifiers that people buy and they're massive. So, like a PlayStation 5 is just like, well, that looks like a whatever, it's just a box. But I think really the reason why PlayStation 5, I mean, Xbox was always a non-starter here for lots of, well, there's one very good reason why that happened, which I could probably explain if you're curious. But with the PlayStation, the reason why it didn't get into its stride and why the Switch did was because the Switch was able to maintain production. That was the main reason.
Makes sense.
I don't think they're falling out of love with the PlayStation, but PlayStation 5. But the problem at the moment is there aren't that many games for the PlayStation 5 relative to the Switch. And I think a lot of that is because a lot of Japanese developers don't want to spend or publishers don't want to spend a crazy amount of money developing a game when they can spend like a fraction of the money on the Switch for development, because the power of the actual hardware is not that great. But with the PlayStation 5, if you want to leverage that, it's really expensive. So like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth took years to make. So that's an incredibly expensive game. Final Fantasy 16, again, took years to make, very expensive. I do think, also, I think Square Enix is kind of the outlier in the Japanese games industry in terms of budgetary spending. They're one of the few that spend a lot of money still. Mm-hmm. I don't know if they're going to kind of, spend the same amount of money, but on lots smaller games. I think that's kind of more what I feel is generally happening across the industry. But yeah, I don't think that people are falling out of love with PlayStation. I just think there's not that many games that they want to play because they're too expensive to develop for, and it didn't have a continued production cycle.
Well, it's interesting you say that because I haven't heard that. All you hear is the lack of popularity. I've even heard, like, I'm a massive Final Fantasy is like my favorite franchise. You hear that Japan just doesn't care about a Final Fantasy as much. But so really, what you're saying, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying what I've heard from other people.
So to put it into reality, what's really happening is like Japan's gaming sales peaked in 1998, I think, and have slowly declined since. There was a real kind of build up and boom of like real million sellers in Japan. That is unbelievably rare now, and that's not just for Final Fantasy or PlayStation, but it's true for Nintendo as well. So I think if you look at the overall trends of the Japanese games industry, Japanese games market, it's much smaller than it used to be. It's actually reduced in size in terms of the overall game sales. What's interesting about Japanese games now is they're selling way more abroad than they ever used to be. So the thing that's kind of hilarious is that Japanese developers only focus on what Japan likes, but really their market is actually the international market. But in a way it works, because the fact that they ignore what the international market wants kind of works, because they end up making interesting stuff that the international
that the international market actually wants.
Yeah, so they give
rather than what they're supposed to want. Yeah, right. Or that we're told we're supposed to want.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so, they're still making games that people actually want to play.
Yes,
and that's where the localization controversy comes up, because these games, unfiltered, the way they're meant to be, is what a lot of people want.
Yes,
and then they go through that localization process, which is, fundamentally, you need localization, obviously, for just basic reasons, but there's a political slant to it.
Well, it's not political. It's so the political thing is not what's actually happening. It's actually a bunch of people here that can't get into proper game development jobs, that want creative jobs, and are trying to get in through the back door through localization. And they're trying to make creative changes because they want to make things, but they're not. I wouldn't say they're not good enough to make things, but they're not willing to put the effort in to get into the industry and work their way up and actually learn how games are made. They just want to skip all that and they just want to kind of mess around with it and have fun with it, at the game's expense. The reason why it's really difficult to track for a lot of Japanese developers is because most of them don't speak English. They're not bilingual. They don't know what's being changed.
They don't understand what's being changed.
Which kind of goes back to that whole Mariko point in Shogun, is like Toranaga doesn't know what Blackthorn is really saying because he doesn't understand. So, and he's getting a kind of a version of what Blackthorn is saying depending on, Mariko's mood. And that
actually, what about that scene with Baranto or her husband, Mariko's husband?
Right.
Where she's translating. That was a great scene, but she's like the translation stuff is so interesting.
Yes.
Because she's being diplomatic, but she's also trying to put a little barbs here and there.
That is what, okay. Yeah. So that's a really good example, but that's kind of a very specific thing. When you're doing localization for games and it's not a conversation, you're not trying to preserve people's feelings on either side. Because that's what a lot of Mariko was doing in that situation. She was trying to pacify.
The peacemaker, yeah.
Yeah, she was trying to stop a situation from escalating, basically.
Which it did anyway.
Which it did. But the thing is with the localization stuff, it's not a political thing. It's purely because these people want to make their own creative impact. It tends to be, again, another small clique of people that think that they're, that they want to get into this. Like I said, Frog Nation are amazing. They're not doing this at all. They do incredibly faithful localizations.
Which is what we hope for.
Yeah, but the thing is I will say this. It takes an incredible amount of creative thinking and intelligence and discernment and experience to kind of... The thing about Japanese is it's a data-heavy language. You can compress a lot of information into a very small amount of text. In English, it's much more broader. So you have a physical limitation of the number of, actual, letters on screen to convey the same amount of information. That is a massive, massive challenge. And to get around that is incredibly difficult. And you need someone that not only really understands the game they're playing, they also need to understand creatively what's trying to be expressed. They also need to understand how they're going to get, the actual translation that it's accurate. So there are a lot of moving parts that are very, very... I have a lot of respect for this because it's very difficult.
Yeah.
And to be honest, it's also, I would say, very difficult from English and European languages, although it's a bit different. But I think a lot of the problem we're having at the moment is with Japanese localization, not with European localization, which again, I think is also a thing, is because, that kind of shows the reality of what's happening, is that nobody really wants to kind of creatively change a German game, but everybody wants to creatively change a Japanese game. So it's very much creatively driven. It's not politically driven.
Well, and it's also just the culture is so different, So you're like a German game. Germany and America are much more culturally simpatico than Japan. I mean, just in terms of our languages have much more common roots, our customs as a Western Christian, whereas Japan has a very different
that's
language, very different. It's much harder to
and
localize.
That's where that cultural issues, I'm going to push back on the non-political point just a little bit, because the localization conversation really has seemed to take root with a lot of these. It can be smaller, but it has branched off in anime and in games where you see, I don't want to generalize too much, but these people seem to they have very colorful hair, and they openly admit that they
I know, I'm laughing because I agree.
They change it because they just feel that's the way it should be, and so they talk about massaging cultural issues, whereas Japan culturally is much different. I'm allude back one sec, Ollie. I'll let you jump in just one sec. Japan culturally is much more like how we used to be in the 80s and 90s in America.
I think how we looked at that element,
male and female roles and things of that nature, and to the localization people in America, where everything is seen through this progressive DEI lens, and they're changing either entire characters and quest lines, things in anime, and they're being exposed. It's almost like that thing. No, it's not happening. okay, it's happening, but it's not what you think. Okay, it is what you think, but it's really not that bad. And it just keeps escalating to that point.
So,
go ahead.
I think it's the same point we made earlier, which is that they don't actually believe in any of this stuff. It's just a social shibboleth. They're using it as a password to gain access to a clique. And I think any of the political stuff that, especially in games, there probably are some people in the anime localization business that may believe in some of it. But in gaming, definitely they just want to fit in with this cool clique of people. And I think a lot of the political stuff is purely just, say the password and gain entrance kind of thing. And it may come across as being something a lot more political than it is. But the reality is, a lot of these people, even on the consulting side of things, just want to get in and make games. Mm-hmm. And I kind of sympathize with that desire, because yes, games are really interesting to make, but there is a route and there's a path to get there, and it's hard work. And I don't think a lot of these people really want to do that kind of work. So that's my main problem with it, is that I do feel like a lot of the political stuff is kind of a not misdirection, but it's not actually what's happening here. It's not the main driving motivation. Especially because a lot of these people couldn't care about anyone else except themselves. Sure. There's no compassion there.
Well, I think that's where, and I think that's where the small, you have fans saying like, we want it to be the way it is, but then they take it as a hard stop, saying you don't know because Japanese this and that. No, we know that it has to be changed to. Certain jokes and references don't fly. It has to be, adapted.
Confusing. Yeah.
But there's a level to it's like when people say they don't want politics in their game, they're not actually saying they don't want politics in their game. They're saying they don't want it rammed down their throat every single point. There's a nuance to that conversation.
If the original Japanese game has a lot of political and ethical discussion going on, then yeah, translate that. What people are upset about more than anything else is they're changing what's actually
changing it. Like, for instance, I just use this. The way trans issues are viewed in Japan is much different than they are in America. And there'll be an allusion to it in an anime or a game. And then you have the original source translated, because now we have AI, which can really take what's in Japanese, and it's much more, it can be quite accurate when you translate it. And it, like the characters, the discussion, it is all completely different. And people are like, why would you do that? Like, I don't know. That is the source material.
Yeah, but they want to be, again, it's this whole narcissism thing where they all want to be the main character.
Of course.
They all think it's about them, and they just want, and they want to make stuff. They want, and in some cases, I would say some of them don't even want the joy of making something. They just want the attention and the social status of being a creator.
Yeah, like they get to say, we talked about gatekeepers. I am the cultural gatekeeper. This is what is proper.
They are, in this instance, yes, they are gatekeepers, yes.
Yeah, and eventually they get to the point where they're just bragging about it. And really, I see that the attitude becomes, well, you can't do shit about it. Like, that's what, and I think that's where the controversy comes from. A lot of people are like, unfortunately, the loudest voice sometimes can't articulate it well, and it seems misconstrued. But
I think also,
if you wade through it, you know exactly what they're saying. And I do agree with them. Like, if I like a show, I want it the way the creator is trying to tell it. I get the language and the lens mildly has to be adapted, but you can't change entire threads and characters.
Well, the goal should be to accurately portray, as best you can, the meaning, even if the literal translation can't do that.
Yes.
I'm always astounded by people who translate poetry.
The only thing I would say
how do you do that?
Is incredibly difficult. It's incredibly difficult to even accurately portray the meaning.
It's very difficult.
And the thing is a lot of it is, there is a lot of cultural stuff. So there is an element of truth to what is behind this, but a lot of what we're seeing in games especially is people it's only a few games, I'll say. It's not that widespread, but it is worrying.
Sure.
It's depressing to see, basically people trying to put their own creative mark on something, much more so than they really should be.
Yes.
I would say
it's not their job.
Hard. I wouldn't say there's a hard and fast, like it has to be super accurate. I think that's incredibly difficult to do based on the limitations and the differences between the two languages and the cultures at work. I think it's very, because there's a huge amount of context to Japanese, which again,
and most of these issues are isolated incidents,
right?
Like this, like a scene with a trans character or something. That's just one little tiny thing in a much bigger. And that's what the headlines are. That's what the controversy is. So
one of the biggest games, one of the Unicorn Overlord, Vanillaware's latest, is there's been a lot of discussion about that. I think some of the localization has been lauded as being extremely well, but I think they've changed a lot. And that's sort of what people are pointing out. And I think rather than have that discussion, it's entirely misconstrued, misframed, and then hand-waved. And that's really what gets people all riled up. They just want to be heard. Yeah. Like, even if it's what we talked about last week with Jaffe and before, like, it's just like, even if you don't agree, like, just listen, hear it out. We may not agree, but okay, I understand where you're coming from. That would go, like, it would move heaven as far as that would go to move the conversation.
Also, right. No, I agree with that. And there's also another thing I'd add to that is that one of the problems that's kind of holding back gamers in having a strong and, viable argument against this is they don't know a lot of how this stuff is made or works.
Yeah.
And I think what you're saying there is actually if people on the development side were actually openly explaining
a little more transparent.
Yeah. And I think that would solve so many problems with gamers misunderstanding who's at fault here.
Yeah.
And also what the actual problem is. And then because the problem is if you can't discern the real problem, you can't figure out the solution. So,
although in defense of people who are on the wrong side of gamers, the number of times that I've been told that my review is biased, it gets old. At a certain point, you're just like, oh, fuck off.
No, so I will say this though. I think it's okay. I think it's if someone is gonna on an individual basis, I think it's okay to engage with people and disagree with people.
Yes,
in our position, but I do think it's wrong just to hand wave an entire.
And that's No, I agree. It gets tough because humans are humans.
I get a lot of that with the stuff. I mean, I did something on Gundam Breaker 4. And I was like, yeah, this doesn't look good. And like a whole bunch of people on the Gundam community just completely lost their minds. And the hilarious thing is most of them had never played any of the older Gundam Breaker games.
Yeah.
So I was like, what? I don't understand. I mean, I'm just giving my opinion on what I'm looking at and it's just not good. So
that's what I had in the True Detective community. Like all the old True Detective fans were like, what the fuck is this new season? And all the new fans were like, you're a horrible. It's like, dude, I don't know how to convert.
Honest, with Gundam especially, it seems to be the new fans are really strange. I don't know why. It's like it's because Gundam is kind of becoming this thing more than it was internationally, and I think they want to be part of this growing phenomenon. And and they all get really upset if anything bad comes up about it, and it's just. But some of it's not good. It's like I can't help it.
No, I mean you gotta,
and it's the older, like the older fans that have been following it for like decades are normally a lot more. Yeah, no, I can see where you're coming from. It's really
because they've been around. Yeah,
well,
they have perspective.
They know what I'm referencing a lot of the time, like what I'm talking about. So in some ways, like having sort of a level of expertise or knowledge about the subject actually is not helping me at the moment. Especially, it just seems to be with a very specific Gundam thing, but. Only with the games, which is weird. Not with the anime, but anyway, that's just a weird thing. Anyway,
so as we reach the 2 hour mark here, I wanted to kind of find like I wanted to like get to our last subject, which both of you today have messaged me about Kotaku, and I think both of you messaged me about the editorial decree that. The writers at Kotaku move away from politics and more toward guides and more neutral.
Things gamers actually care about, basically.
Yeah, things that people. Yeah. So what's going on there? I actually have not actually read any of this because it's all just been a day where I haven't had time to actually look into it. I'm curious what's going on.
The old managing director was let go. Managing editor, main editor and chief was let go, and they want to focus.
I'll just jump in really quick. I just only saw this. the current EIC, which this is like their second or third one in a relatively short span, she stepped down voluntarily of her own accord because of the change from the people who recently purchased Kotaku want to focus on guides and move away from covering news and things of that nature. I don't know how drastic it is. That maybe there's some nuance there. I'm sure there is, but you know they're not
shifting just a little bit, or are they,
and of course,
full blown?
Of course, the childish insults follow, which is typified of all these people. But I mean, in terms of the broader conversation of Kotaku, I mean, it hasn't been relevant for a really long time. The quality of their reporting and articles are absurd for the most part. These personalities typify exactly what we've been talking about from the top of this podcast in a lot of different ways. Sure. I don't need to know them for the most part. And it's just like, I'll go back to Vanillaware. Even when Jason Schreier was there, the misrepresentation of George Kamitani's work for Vanillaware, it was absurd to me. It is so insulting. And they always talk about not punching down. This is a relatively small developer I would say, let's say a mid-level developer who hand draw, an extreme rarity in the video game industry, have this incredible style of all of their own, and they do it all themselves. And because it doesn't fit in culturally with the way America views something, they happen to have well-endowed women. The thing is, the men are just as endowed as, like, they're insanely built with these.
Yeah, it's just. What was the game? What was the game?
That was Dragon's Crown.
Yeah,
Jerry, I remember that. I loved that game. Was awesome.
What I loved about that was that when Jason Schreier complained about it, George Kamitani drew this amazing picture.
Like, maybe you'll like this better, and it was a male, like,
dwarves, like sweaty and muscly, and I just thought that was the most.
And then, like, Eric,
because Kamitani didn't understand the context. He thought, oh right, so you like really sweaty, muscly men.
Let's do more of that.
Yeah, and then after that, really innocent sort of but okay, if you want this, here it is for you. I'll make it for you. Yeah, but I thought that was hilarious.
On that context, and then they take it a step further and say, it's an allusion to homophobic. That, like, that whole art, that was, that's where they're going to take it. And that slant, I don't need to go item by item by item. That slant permeates so much of what they do. It permeates a lot of what games media does. And again, people are sick of it. To me, I mean, I couldn't care less. I'm just going to be honest. I'm not going to be nice about it. That site cannot die quick enough. It is absolutely abysmal. It's a negative to the entire games media discourse.
I'm on the other side of this from you guys. I'm sorry. I disagree often with Kotaku, but I like that there are publications I disagree with. And I appreciate freedom of opinion and speech. And I don't mind that the games press is political. My problem is that they're bullies. My problem is not that they have opinions I disagree with. My problem is that, like, a site like The Gamer, which I find much, much worse than Kotaku, by the way.
It has become,
when they write stuff, they don't even, it's not even, I feel like a lot of Kotaku's political stuff, even when I disagree, like, they have had some pretty talented writers there that have maybe expressed the opinions I disagree with, but maybe in a way that I still felt like they were trying to say something that maybe they believed in. Whereas, like, a place like The Gamer, I feel like they are just fucking scamming you. They don't believe in any of it. So, like, I don't know. Like,
so the only thing is, I don't think any of the Kotaku writers really believe what any of them.
Well, I think it just depends. I do think there's been some that have been
very good at making it look like
maybe so.
I think the problem with The Gamer is that they're not good at hiding it, and I agree with Jason that.
Yeah.
I mean, considering that the last Gamergate controversy was basically started by Kotaku and still hasn't resolved itself.
Well, it was started by.
Well, I mean, Kotaku
I would say
were
it
the
was
ones that.
Lay Alexander.
I mean, the thing is the thing that the editorial could have fixed that issue really simply at Kotaku, and it would have just died quickly, and nobody would have blown up over it.
Right.
So Kotaku was kind of the pivot point where it all went horribly wrong. So,
well, I think there should be some, like, editorial balance. Like, I don't just go out and write my unadulterated opinion about whatever on Forbes. I don't just go say whatever the fuck I want on Forbes. If I really want to, like, go, like, spout my mouth off, I'll make a YouTube video, right?
Mm.
Like, or I'll go write on my newsletter or something. But like, there should be some restraint when you're writing for a publication. Like there should be some restraint. Like, you can't just go, like, okay, like the Troy Leavitt situation with Hogwarts Legacy.
Yeah, we talked about this last time. Yeah,
we talked about this last time. Yeah, the stuff that was being printed about him in places like The Gamer and Kotaku was literally, I think, slander. Like, and there should be some restraint there. You should not be able to, and honestly, like, a responsible publication should rein their writers in a little bit, but still give them room to have opinions.
So the thing is I don't think that is. So if anything, with Kotaku, even though they have editorial, they're not being reined in. And
no, they relish in it. Like, they're almost because
that's
you say they don't believe in it.
The Gawker, the old Gawker scene,
and that's what makes me think sometimes, Ollie, that they do believe in it, because what you see with a lot of this stuff is like, we are right, and we're just going to continue going on this, whether it hurts people or not. And
it's very, very trod upon avenue.
But that's about them being the center of attention. It's about them being
big old dick cunts.
But like, that's why they don't operate on the same rules as like I'm going to use that word, an ethical website would operate under. You know, they think they take a mature stance, a responsible. Let's step back and look at this. You know, is this vitriolic piece that you're writing, is it really framed accurately? Is it saying what we want to say? They don't give a shit. They just let these people write whatever the fuck they want, no matter how much.
Well, you look at stuff like,
and then they write shit. Like, again, you talk about just opinions, and you know, you rein yourself in. Like Oro from Street Fighter, they wrote an article about how they should be able to see his dangly balls. Like, who writes this stuff? Like, I don't understand. Like,
it's just like ridiculous.
It's not even funny. It's juvenile, and I don't want them. You know, I'm not actually, they should be shut down, but after what they've done, it's just like, I don't need them. I wish they weren't around to rile people up. And the truth is, it doesn't matter what I say, because the industry speaks for itself. Sites of their ilk are falling left and right, whether it's Fanbyte, whether it's another one, whether it's another one.
Say, like,
people don't want this stuff.
Yeah. Didn't they try to redo that G4 TV show, and that died as well?
Yeah, that fell apart real bad.
For a lot of reasons, really. So
what's kind of hilarious about it, though, is that, like, as far as like you see all these kind of like ridiculous left-wing websites and game journalists, the outside of, like, I would say maybe like Colin Moriarty, the right-wing response has been equally ridiculous. Like, there is not really like good right-wing games journalism.
But who? Yeah, but I mean, my point is who?
To be honest, is there any right-wing games
journalism? Yeah, I mean, I don't know who they are.
I've never seen that.
Okay.
Colin's a conservative, and I think he does a really good job with his podcast and stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
And I like him personally.
But like, I don't. And one thing Colin always points, it's not about, you know, the true diversity is diversity of thought and opinion, and I think that is almost non-existent. You're supposed to get that with differing backgrounds and cultures, but it seems these people all just, their cars are going down the same lane. Their mindsets are all in the same way.
And it's still using the same framework. I mean, they haven't really adapted. It's just like the same stupid, the readership is wrong kind of thing.
Gamers are dead.
Yeah, it's the same mentality from a decade ago. They haven't learned. Yeah.
Well, and you have YouTube, I guess. That's the counterbalance to game journalism, right?
And Twitter,
Yeah, you have like, and YouTube has its own, like, we could do a whole podcast on the problems with YouTube.
Well, YouTube's where you see more of that that you're talking about, that conservative viewpoint.
Yeah, I just don't. But a lot of it's like very clickbaity and very like bullshit.
Yeah,
a lot of there's like a bunch of just like, we're gonna hate we hate Disney, so now we're gonna just make hate videos about everything. But guys, like, Andor was fucking good. Stop saying that everything that they make is bad, because like. Well, we could talk about the Acolyte trailer, and I think it was personally, but Andor was really good, and Andor was diverse. Andor had LGBTQ characters. Andor was badass. That was a great show.
Yes, it was. But for every Andor, there's like 7 other ones that are just garbage, and I think that's where it comes from. Like, you start to get jaded about a brand or I know that's not really what we're talking about, but you get jaded about these brands. when it seems to stray, and it's sort of like this Acolyte thing, and who is directing and writing it. I mean, it's just it exemplifies exactly what they're doing. Like, wasn't this girl didn't she work under Harvey Weinstein or something?
I don't even care about that. Yeah. Like, I feel bad for any girl who worked for Harvey Weinstein. Yeah. He's a son of a bitch. But you know what struck me about that trailer most is that it's very it's the most diverse Star Wars show ever, right? It's very, very diverse. There's like a scene with like a bunch of Jedi standing in a row with all their different colored lightsabers, and I'm like, where are the droids and aliens?
Where are the aliens? It's
like isn't like Star Wars Rebels like diverse because it's got like, it's got a droid, it's got a couple different aliens, it's got like what are we doing here? We just forget that this is a galaxy filled with like all kinds of different species, and like, no, but we're just going to have a diverse cat. That just drives me crazy.
But right? Again, that's the one thing that when people, sorry, this is really quick, but like they throw this out there, like just let the product speak for itself. What you're making, let it speak for itself. Stop trying to say, oh, it's this and it's this and it's this. It automatically just maybe this.
Tell a fucking story.
Do they do this on purpose? Because I can't understand. Like, I'll tell you right now. Like, if I wanted to write a game, and I am writing a game, but if I really wanted to market it extremely well, I would take the road. Like, I would raise the ire of the games media. I'd piss them off. Because every time they get pissed off at a game and start writing shit about it, the game just explodes. It sells bananas. And I would just do it on purpose. I don't know. Do these people do this stuff on purpose?
Yeah, probably.
So again, they're trying to fit in. It's basically, whenever they kind of sell what it is, they're just trying to fit in with a group of people. They don't care about the audience. That's what's happened.
They want to go to the parties.
Yeah.
That's the big thing.
I mean, none of these people actually probably care about Star Wars. Right. I mean, all the people. Well, I think one of the reasons why Andor and Rogue One was good was because the people on it actually knew and cared about it. They weren't.
Although, what's really interesting is reading Tony Gilroy's interview. I can't remember where it was, but he talked about how he hired a lot of people who weren't Star Wars fans to work on Andor because he didn't want them to be so enthralled by Star Wars. He wanted them to make a good show.
But the thing is, Andor follows on from Rogue One, and Rogue One has a lot of really, really, really faithful stuff to it. So
absolutely.
So because of that structural origin, it is very, very faithful to the original.
Yeah, they just do such a good job. Oh my God, I love.
So I think what they did is they used the foundation from Rogue One that was set up by people that really care about old Star Wars, and then the new people came in, and then they basically sat on top of that, but they didn't fuck with the foundation is the important thing. They didn't change any of that old stuff. They just
they understood that details matter.
Yeah,
the costumes matter. The dialogue matters, not just having a bunch of lightsabers.
Yeah, no. So
there are actually no lightsabers in
the thing is that's what the original Star Wars was. It was this amazing world setting which you only saw a very small part of, and then just normal people got put into the middle of that, and that's what made it believable. And that's why Andor works, and that's kind of why Rogue One works, is because the actual setting it's maintained and it's done in a very not knowing way, but kept very much in the background as purely set dressing for a real story with real people. And I think that's where both Rogue One and Andor succeeded, and I think where all the other Star Wars stuff just fails because they try and explain the setting, and it's just like, or they try and rewrite the setting, and it's just like, that's the second one is actually far worse because you've bought this amazing IP like Disney, and now you're literally destroying your own the value of it.
You have such potential, and you just you can't even put together a cohesive trilogy.
One thing about the Acolyte trailer was that there is an alien. I think one of the younglings is an alien that they do show. But you're right, they don't show like many alien Jedi. It's all humans. So
yeah. I mean, the rest of it is. Anyways, so I think we've gone about 2 hours, which is I think basically all of our time limits. We all have places to be, and this was really fun. This was a great conversation. I think we should do it again. I think there's a lot more to discuss.
Yeah.
I think we've touched on the surface of a lot of issues like the layoffs, the bloat in the games industry, the culture wars. Obviously, behind all of this is Mr. Sweet Baby, a James Bond villain who has he has created this problem. and has been.
No, we've got to go after Sean Baby. That's the problem.
Oh yeah, Sean Baby,
dude, look him up.
And every DLC item you buy for Dragon's Dogma 2 goes to Mr. Sweet Baby, and to help him pay for his private plane. It's a scam. It's a fucking scam. Anyways, thank you, Ollie, for being on here.
Pleasure. A pleasure to meet you.
Fun.
I mean, we needed to talk about a lot of this stuff because we haven't.
We did.
But the next time, like, I have a ton of questions about Japan. It's like my dream.
Yeah, that'd be a fun.
I've been
really
to Korea twice. I went when I was 15. I went again when I was 21. My best friend's Korean. I've always wanted to get over to Japan. Like, I have so many things that I wanted to ask.
Sure.
But next time we do it, and I like just a lot of questions about the Japanese gaming industry, and like I didn't even. How long have you lived in Japan, Ollie?
So I've lived in Japan for 10 years, and I've worked in anime and video games. So I've worked in anime as well as video games for the last 6 years.
Okay.
So I've worked at anime studios and game studios, pretty big ones. The one thing I was just going to say, I'm really sorry because Eric knows this, but because I'm in Tokyo, there's a time delay, so it probably looks like I'm interrupting you really rudely, and I'm very sorry. But I'm not,
it's always like that when you're not in a room. That's okay. Part of it.
Yeah, it's really bad because I'm in Tokyo, so that's the problem.
Yeah, both my siblings are Korean, by the way. So.
You said that. Yeah.
I'm gonna write for our next podcast. I'm gonna do a cover of Big in Japan, and we'll use that as the music for the episode.
Yeah, I'd love to just pick your brain about Japan, your experiences there.
That'd be great.
Trends, and obviously just things you like. Like it's funny, even though gaming has moved, so to speak, away from Japan as a focus market. To me. And in terms of my tastes, I mean, I'll preface it with that because I don't want people to just jump me. To me, they're making the best games in terms of what I love. I love Japanese games. I always have the quirky sense of humor, the cultural difference just have always appealed to me.
Boobies
and the boobs. Yeah, I mean,
but that also.
Yeah,
it's quite complicated that. But yes, that's a very interesting discussion about how Japanese games have evolved. I think.
Yeah.
As well.
I think that's a whole podcast right there.
And like we can even talk about like that those early 2000s when it seemed like games media turned against almost in like a xenophobic way the way they talked about Japanese games. It's too Japanese. Like people forget about this stuff and they pretend it never used to happen. But like there was this whole backlash against quote unquote Japanese games, and even Shinji Mikami. Was it Mikami? No,
it was
Mega Man.
Yeah, Inafune.
Yes, and he was speaking. Even he's like, we are being left behind. We're not doing it right. Americans doing everything right.
He was right.
He was right.
And the problem, what actually happened is the result or the solution to that was a lot of international staff started coming into Japan. And a lot of the reasons why a lot of games now are much better than they were. So there was probably a very small element of truth that Japanese games weren't as good as they could have been 20 years ago. But I think it was blown up out of all proportion. I think it was done in a very cynical way. The only thing I would sort of add to that was people did notice that happened because I think it was Kotaku again. They got called out recently on their behavior and how they worked 20 years ago.
And I think Gene Park was the one who started.
I wanted to talk about Gene Park.
Yeah, I'm a big Gene fan. I love Gene, man.
But Gene's amazing.
Gene's awesome.
He used his platform to sort of talk about it because of who he is. He's like, no, let's
get Gene on the show.
He's like, no, it literally used to be like this. And then he was quote tweeting things and just to expose it. Like because I remember that myself. I remember that the way these games were being talked about by some.
Yeah. No, I wrote up about it.
No, I mean, isn't that just an echo of the 20 years before that when Americans were really worried that made in Japan, the Japanese were going to take over the industry and all that. Like, I mean, anyways, it's interesting. But
next time
we are wrapping this episode up. You guys keep trying to.
I know.
I was doing an outro and you fucking hijacked my outro. I was ambushed on the way outro by you guys in your outro ambushing. But this was really fun. This was lovely. And Ollie, I think there's a ton more to talk about. and we'll just do it again soon. So,
yeah, sure.
Yeah, thank you for making the time. I'm glad that our multiple time zones all lined up pretty well. I think that if this works for you, we can definitely do a similar.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
A similar thing. Like,
I'd love that. Even in a couple weeks, if possible, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, we can keep this conversation going. So, thank you to our listeners, viewers, whatever. Episode 8 of Game Night is done.
We're getting on a good clip. I like this.
Peace.
Later, everyone.